Uh, now, is that a bias in your pocket, or are you just happy to be here?
I'm really happy to be here, Jason. I'm really happy. Looks like Albert Ellis is happy to be here too, and he's a hero of mine. So it's great to
I
have
don't
him
know
in
anything about
the
that,
artwork.
Albert
Oh
Ellis.
yeah. No, we've talked about Albert Ellis a little bit, but we're going to talk about him a little bit more tonight. The artwork from the art department, quite remarkable. For those of you who are not familiar with the banana art, this is not Sticky Fingers. This is not Rolling Stones, right? This is not Andy Warhol. This is a different scenario. And the question I think we're going to get to when we go patron only is, would this art installation have existed without Sticky Fingers, without Andy Warhol? We're going to get into that deeper. Well, you're going to talk about the banana? You want to explain to people the banana and banana bias?
Right. People might remember there's this thing in Miami called Art Basel, which is like it's kind of cool, actually. You can go there and see a lot of interesting artwork. And I think it was Banksy. I could be wrong, but they did some kind of art installation of a $120,000 banana just duct taped to the wall. And then this guy, challenging art, he just walked up and took off the banana and started eating it. This woman's taking a selfie with another banana and a banana shirt. It's a bit of I don't know. But this dude ate the banana and people went nuts, I think. I mean, I don't understand. Did they charge him for the...
oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Had to be insurance involved and what have you. But we're going to talk about biases, right? And how people who buy art are biased to buy into the fact that banana is worth $120,000, right? That's their bias. And then there's other people who have a different bias, who say that looks like a banana taped to a wall. Your perspective on that banana is going to depend on a number of things that Albert Ellis documented. And we're going to look at that more closely in the show. So that's how the banana factors into bias. Is it worth $120,000? Some people said yes. So we're going to go to the presentation and we're going to dig into this and we're going to show everybody bottom line up front what we got prepared.
Well, before we do that, though, let me just run through a couple things here, because I'd like to let people know that they can watch our simulcasts here on YouTube by subscribing to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. It's the strongest channel we're broadcasting on right now in terms of subscriber numbers. You've got 41,300 subscribers there. I want to thank the 75 people, 77 numbers rising. Thanks to everybody who's watching us on the John E. Hoover channel. John, I mentioned this before. I've also created this John Cullen Investigates channel so that we can have some more places for the simulcasts to play, and also to have a home for some of the videos that got blitzed when some of the other crowdsourced the truth channels went away. Good viewership on the original videos there. Jake, we were just speaking about bias and nonsense. That's a good video for people to watch. And I've got to get back into loading some of our old videos. But people can also watch on Rumble. You have created an I Am John Cullen channel. People can go there to Rumble and just put in I Am John Cullen, and they're going to get right to you. It's always giving me videos of hamsters or dogs or whatever they got going on here. I think they're trying to compete with YouTube. But Rumble is a great way for people to stay in touch with us, and I think that it's hopefully a little bit more resistant to videos being deleted for stupid reasons.
And I've been posting the videos on Rumble that tend to get deleted from YouTube. So the videos that YouTube had an issue with, I've been posting to Rumble, even if they're a few months old, to give people a perspective as to, this is what they had a problem with, and I wanted you guys watch it and see what you think and see what did you find problematic or dangerous to society kind of thing. And, again, grateful that Rumble is willing to take some chances that the guys at Google aren't. And what are you going to do, right? So, so I've been posting some of that stuff over at Rumble.
We've
But
also
I don't
got,
have the live streaming. I don't, you do. You've got the live streaming, I don't.
you got to pay extra for that. And I don't mind doing that because I like to support these alternative platforms. And frankly, I'm a big proponent of, you get what you pay for. So with, YouTube, they're trying to make you think it's free, but it's not. You're basically giving away your right to freedom of choice, and the whole. We all see now what has happened with this quote free system. It's part of the reason, John, why you and I have created this sponsor exclusive broadcast series. People can watch the shows on subscribestar.com/I am John Cullen, patreon.com/I am John Cullen, and subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. And it's a great way to keep our show going and to have these alternative platforms, where people can see this stuff once YouTube takes over the world, which they already have.
Well, also, you've got this video server that's yours,
Right.
the system that on Subscribestar, we're able to host our patron-only videos in a manner that basically, unless your hosting company decides they want to close the doors, but you're in pretty good shape as far as
that won't work
yours.
like that. I'm just using a data center that I pay to run a computer, and they don't look at it or care, unless something illegal happens with that and the cops or somebody comes and gives them some kind of legal document. They don't have this whole set of rules that if you say the wrong name for somebody, you are dead naming them and that gets you thrown off the platform, or if you question certain controversial things having to do with Donald Trump and the guy who is, I think, the president right now. All that's legal to do in the actual world, but on social media, they can totally take your stuff off for that. And it's getting really bad, John. I was watching a Jen Psaki press conference before where she's like saying, well, it's not enough that Facebook would ban somebody. If you get banned in one place, you should just be banned everywhere because,
We're watching digital book burning right in front of our eyes. And again, I've said this before with Dr. Jensen and Dr. Schwelt, and we've had a lot of doctors and PhD doctors on, medical doctors and PhDs. And I think the medical doctors are stunned that they're being silenced, right? And so again, this comes back to bias, right? So who is it that believes? So it comes down to belief systems, and we're going to get into all these beliefs. But it appears that there's a group of people that work at these various social media companies that believe that doing what they're doing is in the best interest of the public, number one. And they believe that they know better than people who are 20, 30, 40 years their seniors.
And have degrees in this stuff and have studied it.
And
are following
actual
the scientific
experience.
process.
Right, and actual experience, right. So when you're talking about systems and you're talking about expert systems, right, artificial intelligence and expert systems, right, they kind of go hand in hand. Are there a lot of people on Earth today that have more experience than David Hawkins? Probably not, right? And yet there's people who work at these social media companies who think they know better about topics where this man has spent an entire career. And so they'll strike a video for that reason. That's a bias. And we're going to dig into these biases tonight. And I want to look at my biases, right? Because my biases are important. It's important that we know what they are, right? And am I aware of them? Do I use them in a certain way? Like confirmation bias, for example. Is there a time when using confirmation bias makes sense? And that's what we're going to look into tonight. So
cool. Yeah, that's good. I mean, one thing I might differ on is that I'm not sure that these people necessarily think that it's better for society what they're doing. I think they believe they should be in charge and that other people who challenge them should not have the opportunity to challenge them. And since they have the opportunity to, rather than debating somebody and letting the stronger idea win, which, by the way, is the nature of science, whatever you're doing. When I was in the 3D business, there were sort of two fundamentally different ways of shooting 3D. And I was a big proponent of one way at first because of major deficiencies I saw with the other way. But then I discovered a new optical element that dramatically improved the alternative method, and I switched my approach. And by introducing this new optical element, I really improved 3D cinematography. So this concept that science is fixed and we're stopping here, no more advancements, no more debates, no more questioning, that makes no sense.
No, and so all of these beliefs, so the word belief and the word bias are just about synonyms. They're really close. And that's what we're going to learn from Albert Ellis, is that our beliefs basically form our biases. And our beliefs are the sum total of our life experiences. It's the stuff what happened to you as a kid, and what happened to you as a teenager, and what happened to you in your 20s, and then your 30s, and then your 40s, and then your 50s, and then your 60s. And this is what forms your belief system, are the experiences that you've had. And what makes it remarkable is that there's really no two people on earth that have had the same life experiences except for Siamese twins, and even they're having sex with two other guys at the same time. So they're not having the same life experience. Yeah,
well, that
you know that, right?
Either female or gay, or
no, so
we don't want to.
There's a female Siamese twin pair that married two guys. Yeah. So even they have had different life experiences. Yeah. Fabulous. No, let's not bring that up. Let's go to my deck if we can. Let's go to my deck.
They're so fascinating, though, those conjoined.
No, please. Come on.
Girls.
This is not the Howard Stern
They
show.
had a reality show for a while. Yeah, Abby and Brittany.
Jesus, you got to do this, huh? Okay.
Well,
fabulous. Yeah, it's a great show.
I mean,
all right. So even conjoined twins don't have the exact same life experience, right? Because they got married to two different guys, so they're not having, even though they're in the same,
one of them
sharing
has
the same body,
sort of a straighter head, and I think more of the organs.
Right. We're way off track. Can we come back to the deck, please? And let's show the audience what I prepared. We're halfway through the show.
Oh, no, we're not.
Well, we're a quarter way through the show. All right. So we're here to talk about biases, and we're going to start with the cognitive bias codex, right? And what this does is it breaks down your thoughts, your thought patterns, how we think about things into different categories. And there's so many different aspects of this. And we've talked about anchoring bias. We've talked about availability heuristic bias. We've talked about ostrich. We've talked about bias. Bias is when you think you're less biased than other people. And I don't think that. I think I'm really biased, right? And I'm going to show you why I'm biased, how I'm biased, and how I can check myself knowing I'm biased, although I bitch and moan about it, right? So like when I had to go look at all the damn airplanes, right? When they were saying, no, those aren't helicopters, those are airplanes. I'm like, God damn it. I'm going to have to sit here and catalog every single one of them, aren't I? And that's what I ended up doing, right? Now I was biased in that I didn't want to have to do that, but I did it anyway, right? That's painful. I hate that. All right. So this documents all these different cognitive biases. We're going to come back to this again and again through the show. All right. And this is how the mind kind of works, right? How we sort through things. This is when we talk about the gorilla illusion, right? Why does the gorilla illusion work? Perceptive, right? Cognitive perceptions and perceptive biases and things like that. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to show everybody kind of how this all comes together and actually makes sense. So Albert Ellis is kind of the key guy. He's still alive. He's a really famous psychologist guy. And the formula of his that's really famous is in the right. You'll see it on the next slide. Just go to the next slide and it gets real big. And we'll drill in on that on the next slide. And we're going to use it to oversimplify the problem. Now, last week we talked about the oversimplification of America's problems. Right? This is a segment of the show that everybody really liked. Let's go back up one slide and just show everybody the title of the segment. The oversimplification of America's problem. Last week we talked about the fishing rods. and how America can't build a fishing kit. Well, America can't build a fishing rod for $25 and sell it at retail. And then we talked about, well, once we catch the fish, whose fish is it? Well, the next question is, well, what is your fish bias?
What do you mean?
So Jason, okay, well, when this guy holds up this fish, your perception of that fish versus my perception of that fish, you look at that and say,
I prefer salmon.
Okay. I look at that and say, that's a reasonable size largemouth bass.
Seems big
Somebody,
for me.
Okay, now somebody from Arkansas looks at that and says, you call that a bass? That's
I didn't even know it was a bass.
Okay. So different people have different biases looking at the same thing. Some people, okay, are you familiar with a town on Long Island called Roslyn? Are you familiar with Roslyn? You've heard of Roslyn?
Yeah,
okay.
I've been there.
So some women from Roslyn would look at that and say, ew, that would be
Roslyn?
Their bias. I'm just, picking a place where women would look at that and go, ew, right? So that would be a bias that you would kind of expect from a certain group of people that live in a certain town to look at the fish and go, ew,
it's a good
I don't
point,
have
though,
to touch that.
A lot of people are biased against fish, possibly because at a young age they had a particular type of fish with a strong smell, and then they think every fish stinks, and they don't want it.
Now you show this to a family in Ethiopia, and they're like, hungry. Are you kidding me? Yeah, they're like, that's a meal for a week. All right, so let's go to the next slide.
It's kind of big. It looks bigger than a fish.
Well, he's holding it up in front of the camera. Now, what is your dog bias? Different people have different biases about dogs. Once bitten, twice shy, right? Now, some people look at the little dog on the right and go, oh, it's so cute. Oh, my God. And some people look at that same dog and go, are you kidding me? I can't kick it far enough. Different people have different biases.
Annoying, but I like those little Yorkies. They're nice.
So that's your bias. I don't particularly care for little dogs. Now you look at the big dog on the left, the Rottweiler, and some people look at that and they're like, and they get terrified, right? And I look at that dog and all I want to do is get a tennis ball and play, right? So that's my bias towards big dogs. Yeah. I'm biased towards them. But if you're once bitten, I expect you to be twice shy, right? If you've had 4 freaking lawsuits in the last 3 years, I'd expect you to be, well, you know what I'm saying, right? So it's all based on what have your experiences been. My experiences with Rottweilers have been amazing. Incredible dogs. Bright, fun, affectionate, smart, playful, loyal, great dogs.
Just the food bill from that dog and the cleaning up. I was friends with a little Yorkie named Rico, who was a sweet little dog, but this haircut on this other Yorkie is annoying as hell. I couldn't deal with that.
All right,
that dog.
So these are our biases, and this is okay. In other words, I want everybody to kind of embrace your bias. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bigot.
What is this?
It just means God only knows.
Is this dog with the tiara? No. That doesn't go.
If you're from the South, you're just going to clip that off, put a little fishing hook in it. And
that dog is living in Roslyn.
I'd catch a trout with that. That's a fly from where I come from. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Slide. All right, so now we get into the serious stuff. So now what is the Johnny Hoover channel bias? When somebody looks at my channel, what is the bias from the outside? Because I certainly have a bias as to what I think I'm trying to portray. And yet when I read the comments, half the time I'm doing the face in the palm thing. Because I'm reading this stuff, I'm like, really? You guys still don't get what I'm trying to communicate here. You don't understand what I'm trying to say. So looking at the channel from afar, from arm's length, and saying, well, what is the channel bias? How is it looked at from afar? What would Maria Bartiromo think looking at the channel? What would Jon Stewart think looking at the channel? What would Tucker Carlson think looking at the channel from afar? Somebody had no idea who the hell I am. looking
Well,
at the
they obviously
get up,
like it because they're
looking at
using all that material.
but then, right, but then you've got the bias around the get up, right? The fact that I'm anonymous, the fact I'm, not associated with anonymous, but the fact that, people don't know my real identity and I cover that up. There's a heavy bias around that. And that's something that's really important to talk about, because that's something that I embrace, meaning there's not just protecting my identity, but I don't want you to have to factor in my background. I don't want you to have to factor in my opinion. I don't want you to have to factor in my assessment. There aren't 10 people dead in Shanghai. There aren't 10 people dead in Beijing. And it doesn't matter if I'm really John Travolta or Albert Einstein's great-grandson. It doesn't matter. There's still not 10 people dead in Shanghai. So what the hell difference does it make who I am? And that's why you don't see me in a bow tie, blah, 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 for an hour, right? So I don't do that. I want to let the data do the talking. I don't exist. I'm in the shadow. I don't have an opinion until you ask me, what the hell's your opinion? What are we looking at here?
So what is the bias?
That's why I know what I'm talking about with the maps has some relevance. Understanding that I have a background in prestidigitation isn't to brag that I know how to make cards disappear. It's to help people understand that my biases are oriented towards trying to figure out how things work that are highly deceptive, professionally deceptive. You ever tell people what happened that night we went to the restaurant in Las Vegas when you were in the bathroom? I don't think we ever told that story. You went to the bathroom. We were in Las Vegas. All right, so we were in a restaurant in Las Vegas together. You took me out to dinner.
That Italian restaurant?
We went there. You went to the men's room, and I took a deck of cards out while you were in the men's room, and I turned one of those cards over. You came back from the restroom, and I told you to look deep into my eyes and figure out what that card was.
I'm biased towards forgetting this. What happened? I don't remember.
You were right. So the card that you looked into my eyes and said something like, 7 of clubs. And that was your next question, was how the hell did I do that? And you said that, and the waitress was standing there. No, you did it. And so, again, this is about figuring out how weird things happen. That's the only reason I share that. What is that? What are we looking at?
Well, I'm trying to remember the name of that restaurant, and it was right near the convention center, as I recall. It's one of the most famous Italian restaurants there in Vegas. Yeah. What's it called?
I don't recall.
Is it Pietro's?
Yeah, it sounds right. But I could be wrong.
Not important.
But
they're Piero's.
No.
That's it.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. So you went to the men's room.
But that's obviously an illusion. You're somehow forcing the card after I say it's the 7 of whatever, right?
The point is it's about deception, right? And when you've studied this stuff for 50 years, you know, at some point, it ingrained in you. And so when I'm looking at something like this coronavirus outbreak, or we're looking at the Las Vegas shooting scenario, I'm looking at it from a perspective that most people haven't spent 50 years reading the books that I've read on deception. Right? And so my biases and my life experience shapes my work. And that's why it's somewhat relevant. But that's it. That's as far as we go. Right? I know magic. I know databases. I know maps. It's about it. That's as deep as we go.
And guns.
All right. So
we had a good time.
And I know a little bit.
A lot of people in the comments, John, are mentioning that any new viewers who haven't seen your work on Las Vegas should definitely get over to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel and scroll back in the timeline and watch some of that stuff, because we've done a lot of great videos. Also, this trip to the Hoover Dam, and there's a lot of good stuff we did there.
Yeah. I think a lot of people were accusing you and me of draining the dam accidentally. Do you remember when we walked over the dam? Do you remember when we walked over? So we actually walked over the dam, and there was like this really, there was that really Art Deco looking brass bathroom area. And you remember there was a button, and it said, under no circumstances should you press this. Well, I don't remember. I thought it was a joke. I thought that was a joke. So, all right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so what is my bias about my channel? What is it that I think I'm communicating, right? So this is what I think I'm doing. I could be wrong. And this is the part that kind of baffles me, is when people make comments and they're asking questions. And I'm like, I thought that's what all my videos were about. Okay. So I believe my channel's bias when it comes to the coronavirus outbreak in the last year and a half of videos we've been doing has been focusing on the influenza outbreak, right?
Oh, well, that's true.
And the fact that more than 500,000 people have died from influenza, and that when we really take a close, hard look at the coronavirus outbreak, there's not that many people that have actually died from SARS-CoV-2 in places like Beijing and Shanghai and Taiwan and Thailand and Korea, and that the influenza outbreak and the Taubenberger and the Breivik mission, that is really the story. And that the number of deaths that they've been hiding with this influenza burden nonsense has been obfuscating the real numbers for over 10 years. So that's my bias. My bias is the data shows me that's what's been happening. So that's why I get biased towards that, because
towards facts. Biased towards
facts. The facts drive my bat. Right. So in other words, if you keep seeing data, it keeps confirming the same thing. In other words, same thing with Vegas. We keep looking at more and more footage, and you don't see any gunfire coming from 135. So after you watch 20, 30 clips from different camera phones, you start to get biased, and you start to think, well, wait a second. I don't see any. Now you use confirmation bias to go looking for footage of gunfire coming from the room. All right, so now you're looking for it to say, is it or isn't it? And that's how confirmation bias factors in. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so that's, again, our map, right? So that's just sort of our keystone. Now let's go to the next slide. All right, so how do the biases factor in? Last week, we talked about Koch and the postulates, right? We talked about Koch's postulates. Yeah, I think so. I took my inspiration from your thumbnail work. This may be the best thumbnail I've ever done.
It's good.
I was looking at what you do, and I was like, this kind of sucks, but it's the best I can do. All right, so I did this video. This week called Koch and the Postulates, and what we're looking at in this video is this notion. A lot of people have been saying Koch's postulates weren't met. They didn't meet Koch's postulates, right?
But is that, wait a minute, I have a question about bias. Is that a lot of people went and researched it and came to that conclusion, or they just watched Andrew Kaufman videos and decided, well, that guy looks good and sounds smart?
That's a great question. Well, so that's where we're going to peel the onion. That's exactly the question. So we now have to peel the onion and say, well, where's everybody getting this stuff from? Why do people think
I think there is a bias that exists, John, where, and this is kind of a normal reaction. I think there's enough people who say, hey, wait a minute. I don't know what the truth is, but I know that's a lie. I know the news is lying for whatever kind of, tangible reason. And so then therefore, I think there are many people who have a bias towards basically believing anything that contradicts what they know is a lie.
Absolutely. And it drives me crazy.
Yeah, me too.
You see so I'm very active in the comments in my videos. And oftentimes you'll see me telling people, you need to be discerning.
Yeah.
And but to your point, so often people just, if it's alternative, they embrace
like it.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's this is in the vaccine and this is in the vaccine and it's got the graphene and the magnets and this and that.
I don't know about that.
27,000. Yeah. So it's like you can't believe everything. You have to be discerning. All right. So last week we talked about Koch's postulates. And in this video, I went through, we did it in our patron only hour. We dug into this. So I did a video this week to break down the Koch's postulates like what we did in our patron-only hour because it was so important. And the comments that I get are so emotional because basically what I'm doing is breaking down people's heroes. So
what do you mean, emotional? People are getting pissed off?
Yeah, of course. You know me. My bedside manner is, that's it. Yeah, sorry. So, I just don't care. So you don't get ribbons here. There's no ribbons. In fact, there's barely a second place nod, right? What was the movie?
First prize is a Cadillac. Second prize is a set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired.
Yeah, that's how we run.
Coffee is for closers.
Exactly. All right, so we go into Koch's postulates now with bias in mind. So now let's go to the next slide. So when you look at the Koch's postulates, I'm going to oversimplify America's problem again. All right. So this time we're not going to use a fishing rod and a bass. Okay. We're going to take this problem and kind of break it down. So we've got all these doctors and PhDs and whatever saying Koch's postulates haven't been met. Therefore, what exactly?
Yeah.
Therefore, what? So let's go to the next slide. So I posted this on YouTube, and these are just right. So these are just some facts. Okay, China published the SARS-CoV-2 genome January 10th, 2020. You're looking at an electron scan, SEM, right? Which is
people didn't even like that. They said no, it's fake.
Right. And there's a billion images of those. If you go to, Getty Images or whatever, there's a billion of them. All right. So when people say it doesn't exist, when we have the genome, we're looking at it under the microscope, you kind of sound like an idiot because that's not what Koch's postulate goes to at the end. That's not what Koch's postulate is calculating for. So whoever's telling you that if we didn't do the Koch's postulate, it doesn't exist, has the reading comprehension of a 4-year-old. Because what Koch's postulate is testing for is causality.
Well, so why did Andrew Kaufman say that? I mean, he's a psychiatrist.
He's not the only one. Not the only one. So what people don't seem to understand is that just because it hasn't been isolated 1,000 times or 10,000 times doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means that that particular virus may not be causing the affliction that we see in the hospital bed.
Right.
That's what it means.
There's got to be a name for this, John, because there's another guy Chris Bolin, who raises a lot of really good evidence about 9/11, but then he draws these conclusions that I don't feel are directly supported by the evidence that he's raised. It's sort of like, look at all this great evidence, and here's what I think happened, irrespective of all this evidence.
Right. So the whole argument that it doesn't exist is so bizarre because, again, we're looking at it now. Right. Yeah. And so then the question is, okay, so what? So I think most people never heard of isolating a virus until 18 months ago. Right. Yeah. So if you go back to 2016, did anybody watching this show know what isolating a virus is all about? Maybe 4 of you, 5 of you. Never heard. Yeah, nothing. In fact, I didn't know for my whole lifetime what it was I was getting sick with every year when I got the fever and was in bed and sweating with 102 fever. I didn't know that was influenza. I didn't know that. I just called it, I'm sick. right? I would call in sick to work. You call your vice president. You tell him, I can't make the meeting today. I'm in bed with 102 fever. And he goes, well, what do you got? And you go, I don't know. I'm freaking sick. And I'm burning up. And I'm sick.
Yeah. What am I, a doctor?
I didn't know it was influenza.
Yeah.
No, I never really got the vomiting. But you get, the 102.7 and you can't move and you're in bed and you got the blankets and you're sweating like a pig and it goes on for days.
Yeah, that's high fever. You get like delusions from 102.
It's influenza, but I never knew that's what it was. I would just call in and say I'm sick with a bad fever. I didn't know what the hell to call it. I didn't know that's what it was until all this stuff happened. And when
sorry to interrupt with this non sequitur, but Carl B reminds us that July 16th, 1999 was the JFK Jr. plane crash.
Yeah.
Separate topic.
Yeah. I saw that pop up. Yeah. So.
And
all
Michael
right, let's
wants
go to the next slide.
If you've seen smart guillotines. I don't even know what that is.
No, but it sounds like fun. I think we should get a couple of those too, just in case some of our clone puppies don't work out. All right, so let's go to the next slide with Ellis.
Clone Rico.
You were just there. Exactly. All right, so what is this Albert Ellis ABC model? So Albert Ellis says you start with an activating event, meaning something happens. Anything. A joke is told, a kid says something, a dog walks by in the street, you and Charles are walking down and somebody's dog poops on the sidewalk. You've got an activating event. Okay. Now, based on your beliefs, which is the green box in the middle, there's going to be consequences, right? You and Charles did a show the other day.
Pick up that crap from the dog.
Okay. Now, Charles has a completely different set of beliefs.
He'll walk away.
You too, because his life experiences were different than yours. However, you two have common beliefs about certain topics. Yet, Charles isn't going to yell at the couple with the dog. Why is the dog off the leash? That's not
actually
Charles.
Just to fill in the audience, because a lot of people are like, oh, you don't, Charles is too fancy and important for you to yell at people.
The show. He hunted him down and shot him.
Has told me that he appreciates that I do that, because as much as he would want to do that, his bias is that's not gentlemanly, so he's not going to do it. But he wants the person to be told to go F themselves.
So again, so when you go back to that cognitive codex, that's how complex our belief systems are. Right? So Charles has those feelings inside, yet his beliefs are that voicing them in public in a manner like what you do is outside of his comfort zone, or just outside of his comfort zone. He's not comfortable doing it, or it's not appropriate, or it reminds him of his uncle when he was 7 that used to yell at the guy on the board. You don't know what his belief system was based on. It's an entire lifetime of experiences. Well, you couldn't have been there for the whole again. Okay, well there you go. So then you can know. All right,
somewhere in his head is
Mrs.
Ortel saying, "Charles, gentlemen do not yell at assholes on the street."
Exactly, and don't wear white after Labor Day. All right, so that takes us to the consequences. So basically, for any given activating event, whether it's the fish, the dog, the big dog, the little dog, the shooting in Vegas, the coronavirus, your belief system is basically your biases. And if you're aware of it and you become aware of things like normalcy bias says that things that haven't happened before, probably never happen, right?
Right.
So that's why the Vegas shooting. Exactly. So when the Vegas shooting happened, normalcy bias kicks in because Americans have never been shot at from helicopters in America. But
if I were walking down the street
in Yemen,
winged dragon took a crap, I probably wouldn't tell it to pick up the crap.
All right. Well, hold on to the dragon. What I'm saying is now, if you live in Yemen, getting shot at from helicopters happens every other week on Thursday.
Right.
Okay.
You might have
So
a tunnel
your
built to go
bias.
into.
So as soon as you hear something, you're heading for the thing. Whereas, if
Yeah.
you're in Las Vegas, you're like, what? There's helicopters shooting at people? What are you talking about? Your bias and your perspectives are different based on your life experiences. If you grew up in Yemen, you know what it sounds like when helicopters come and the miniguns are going. All right, so let's take this ABC model, the activating event and the beliefs, and let's apply it to the next slide. Okay. When we go to our patron-only hour, we're going to dig into the U.S. code. I'm going to give everybody a peek of just like one or two pieces before we go patron-only. But what I did in the last video I made was we looked at the law. You and I keep talking about the law. What's the law say? And while Heather and Brett are still talking about that they may have suppressed certain therapeutics in order for other things to happen down the road, you and I have lapped them now twice, because now the questions that we're asking have to do with, was the emergency use authorization lawful in the first place?
Right.
Because if the EUA isn't lawful, it needs to be rescinded immediately. Now, what constitutes this emergency? All right, and we're going to dig into that. Let's show everybody one or two slides before we go patron only. All right, so for example, question number one. This is sort of where Heather and Brett are. They're a couple weeks behind us. If any oral therapeutic had been found to be effective, the EUA would not have been granted for a vaccine. Is that true? That's a question. And by any oral therapeutic, I'm asking about aspirin or Xofluza or Relenza, anything. Okay? Now, Heather Haying explains this to Brett Weinstein. Brett freaks out, thinks it's horrible, goes on Tucker, explains it to Tucker. Everybody's talking about this right now. But I think it goes way deep. It goes way deeper than this, because we go to the next slide, question number 2. And this was the grant itself unlawful? Nobody's asking this question, which means Tucker Carlson should ask this in the next week on the show. Since remdesivir was readily available and fully approved by the FDA in October of 2020, and the vaccines and the EUA for the vaccines were after October 2020, should the EUA have been granted at all? Now, the argument that Moderna and Pfizer make is that remdesivir doesn't prevent the disease. It only treats it. Well, we don't have a vaccine for HIV. We don't have a vaccine for HIV.
Right. The law says if there's something that can treat it.
Well, so the point being that in the world of HIV, we do not have a vaccine. We only have stuff that can treat it therapeutically. There is no EUA for HIV, or for a HIV vaccine. There's no EUA. Now, if you and I want
for scientific fraud,
here's
while trying
the thing.
to create the HIV vaccine.
Well, what we could do with that new gene, the gene synthesizer I want to buy, when we're not making puppies and kittens, we could synthesize. Listen to this. You know that you can make custom vaccines in it, right? You know that.
You told me that.
Tailored medicine. So imagine if we got Dr. Judy to just create the spike protein from HIV, and we put that in the mRNA capsid. We take just the HIV spike protein, we put it in the mRNA capsid, the lipid clamshell thing that I love, that clamshell. Yeah. And we just put the HIV spike protein. That's it. Just the spike protein from HIV. Did we just invent the HIV vaccine?
No.
I think we did. Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Oh. So why don't they just do that?
If you do a search, it only took Moderna 2 days to come up with this. We just came up with the HIV one in 2 minutes. That's how it works. That's Moore's law. The first one took 2 days. This one took 2
How long
minutes.
will it take to clone Taylor Swift?
How long is it going to take to fill in the next Nobel Prize application? All right, here's how it works. If the coronavirus vaccine for SARS-CoV-2 simply takes the spike proteins from the SARS-CoV-2 virus and puts them inside that little capsid, can you show everybody that little patented capsule thing with the hinge that I love?
What was the name of that group that did that at Harvard? I
forget. But you've shown it a number of times. It's the thing with the lipids, and it looks like a shark's egg or something. And it has the hinges in it.
It's like Wesleyan or something, or like it's like the name of the WIS. That's it. It reminds me of the company from Alien, the Wayland Corporation.
You had the image of it. That's so cool. Yeah. That's it. Okay. All right. So effectively, this is how the mRNA thing works, right? It's this lipid thing with some proteins that make a hinge. And once it gets inside the cell, it opens up. And this gets through the cell wall, right? That's how this thing works. Opens up, releases the RNA, and your ribosomes go to work. That's my understanding. So now, if it's effective with SARS-CoV-2 spike proteins, and effectively that gives people immunity to SARS-CoV-2, well, then it should follow that if we simply put the HIV spike proteins, the H1 spike proteins, all the spike proteins, whatever we've got, let's just put the spike proteins in here, and we've got a vaccine. It took Moderna 2 days. 2 days. Took us 2 minutes.
Have they determined that it's actually inoculating anybody? Because now what we've been hearing is that there's all this huge
specific
increase.
Remember what Zuckerberg said, as long as it's safe, what difference does it make if it's effective? That's what Zuckerberg said.
Holy cow,
I did a video. So I did a video this past week with Zuck and Fauci. And the interesting twist in that video is that Fauci says to Zuck, yeah, we're not going to have a vaccine for like a year and a half.
When did that come out?
In March of 2020.
Wasn't it already out, the vaccine?
March of 2020 is a year, 15 months ago.
Oh, right.
It's 2021. It's 2021.
Right. Well, so Fauci was wrong. I think Trump partially wants to tout the vaccine. Here's Zuck holding a white supremacist thing.
Yeah,
there's a lot of videos of people cringing about the American flag now. It's terrible.
He's fabulous. Yeah, he's really heroic. I'm so grateful that he's protecting me. Yeah, I'm very grateful.
I want one of these surfboards. It's probably $1 million.
I'll get you one. Yeah.
Come
on.
All
right, let's go to our next slide, and we got to wrap it up. We got to go patron only in like 2 minutes. All right. So finally, So the question here is, no. Stay back up. All right. So we were talking about the remdesivir. Remdesivir was approved in October. The vaccines are approved in December. And according to the law, you're not supposed to get an EUA if there's an effective and approved therapeutic. Moderna and Pfizer make the argument that it doesn't prevent the disease.
Who makes that argument?
We don't have Moderna to the FDA.
Oh, that the therapeutic.
And Pfizer.
Okay, got it.
So they say you should give us an EUA because although you have remdesivir, it doesn't prevent the disease. Okay.
But they didn't read the law.
We don't have a preventative for HIV. There's no vaccine for HIV. There's therapeutic treatments for it. There's no EUA for an HIV vaccine. So
John,
if any other... Yeah.
Huffman Aviation says, Fauci's been trying to make an HIV vaccine out of a coronavirus, believe it or not. I don't know if I've heard
You're going to see now... Well, so already they're packaging the influenza and the coronavirus together. We're seeing that already. But the final question here is if any other oral therapeutic was found to have prophylactic benefits, would the EUA have been granted? So in other words, if they said, oh, you know what? If you take aspirin every other day, for some reason you don't get it. And what the hell do we need a vaccine for? So if any other oral therapeutic, hypothetically speaking, had been found to have prophylactic benefits, So if they said, oh my gosh, all you need to do is take amoxicillin once a week and you won't get this thing. Or what if it had been something like an antiviral? What if they had said Relenza, right, which is an antiviral, or Tamiflu, or Zofluza? And then if you take it, you're not going to get it. There you go. Moderna's next act is flu, Zika virus, HIV. Absolutely. All we need is a spike protein, and it's the same package. That little clamshell thing is like the FedEx thing. Yeah. $100 billion market cap. Yep.
And where is this from?
I'm bullish on the technology. I just feel like using it for respiratory infections that haven't killed 10 people in Shanghai and Beijing is a little bit of overkill. That's my opinion. That's my bias. I could be wrong, right?
This guy looks like the villain from Despicable Me.
He does. So my bias, just to be real clear as we wrap up, because we have to go Patreon only, but I want the audience to understand that my bias says if there's less than 300 children of school age from 5 to 18 that have died, I'm not sure I understand the strategy of vaccinating millions of children if the same number of kids died in the same time period from influenza. So that's my bias. You may disagree with it. You may think it's callous. But it's important that you know where I'm coming from. So when we go patron only, we're going to dig in deeper. We're going to look at the law, the U.S. Code, and we're going to explore what does it take to end an EUA? When is it over? Does it end? And what does it look like when it ends? And we're going to explore that when we go patron only.
Second Wind is saying that remdesivir was discontinued in a trial in Africa because it was killing people.
Well, the WHO doesn't recommend it at all. So the World Health Organization recommends against it entirely, yet it's the only FDA-approved therapeutic. So
but is
there's
that
a contradiction there.
Tedros wants to corner the market on killing people in Africa, and he doesn't want anybody cutting in on his territory?
He's running again for another round. So he's going for 5 more years.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll be back.
Right, I think we got to make a transition. We got to transition over.
Less than 10 minutes, we will be available to sponsors on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Big thank you to all the sponsors who make this show possible. If you're not a sponsor, but you enjoy watching the show every week, become a sponsor, because we can't stay here without you. And the cost of doing the show is constantly increasing, different services we have to pay for and all the, I won't go into all those details, but we appreciate all the sponsors. And if you can't sponsor the show, the other way you can help is by emailing this video around. If everybody watching right now emailed this video to 2 or 3 people that you know who you think would find it interesting, that would help us a lot too. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see sponsors in just a few minutes.